Okay, so very nice. Like usual, you guys are a great class. I was reading your reading assignments. Really nice observations. Let's go over a bunch of them and then we'll focus on today life in the harem. I'm going to focus on chapter 2. We're going to see a little bit what can we get from this crazy 12-month treatment. We're going to have a spa day today. The guys are invited. Okay, so let me start with Olivera. Olivera is still very disappointed with the story of Esther so far, right? She's wondering, are you here, Olivera? Can't see you. There
Yes, I am.
Good. Yeah, so she's like, I do not see how these characters, Esther and the king, are going to end up in some kind of sacred marriage. Like, I do not see this happening, right? And you're right. Where we are right now in the story, they're both very flawed. I mean, the king is a mess, and Esther is not so good either. We're going to talk about that a little bit. I mean, we talked about it before, but she's just, absolutely no backbone, passive, just people pleaser. I mean, maybe that's why, just to respond to Pierre Antoine, maybe that's why everybody loves her because she's just such a pleaser, right? And she's hiding her true self, right? So this is really Esther is kind of a coward, really, right? She's kind of not much personality, really, when you compare her to Ruth, right? Oh my God, this is no comparison, right? I mean, Ruth has such an established personality and she's described already as a woman of valor. At no point is Esther described as a woman of valor, right? Or as a strong woman. She's not, right? So, yes, it looks, we can't even imagine how these two are going to do anything interesting. Alim, you want to say something? Go ahead.
I mean, just to like come in the defense of Esther, I guess, like I'm seeing a very young woman who is kidnapped from her family and then forced to like be a prostitute for this random old man. So obviously, at this point, like as a woman, she isn't developed, and I mean, I kind of saw it as that because of this like stealing of dignity is this is why like she feels like she has to be submissive to survive in this environment. So like maybe she's just in this like situation which is very intense for her, and that's why she's like this right now.
Oh, absolutely, right? She's very young. We know she's probably still even a teenager, right? So she's younger than you guys, right? Most of you. Maybe not Alim, who's still in high school, but she's probably Alim's age. So just imagine Alim having to go to the king like this, right? So yeah, so of course she's in survival mode. She's trying to survive. So she's just chameleon, right? Trying to very different again from Daniel, who was also a teenager. Now to go back to bashing Esther, if I may, Alim. Right? We have a similar story. If you all read, really try to read the book of Daniel. Because they're in parallel. Daniel is also a teenager, kidnapped, castrated, right? It's very violent what happens to Daniel, right? And yet Daniel shows much more strong personality, right? He stands up for what he believes. He asks for a special diet. He wants to eat kosher, right? So you have a very, even though they're very young, same situation of kidnapping, right? They're both kidnapped. They're both brought to this place, and yet Daniel. So I'm still gonna go for. I get it, Alim. I'm on Esther's side, but at this point, honestly, I agree with Olivera. She's not sure. She's very um, whitewashed. I don't know how to say. She's just very. There's not much substance to Esther yet, and we understand why. She's very young. But Daniel was a little more successful, right, in terms of substance. Pierre Antoine, you want to add?
Yeah, I do. I just like my confusion with Esther is that like I get she has to like hide her identity for protection and like because Mordecai basically like told her not to like reveal herself. But at the same time, like I don't understand how she could hide her like her personality like so much. Like she's like basically just like subdues her whole entire personality just like I guess to be a people pleaser and all of that. And I just don't understand like she can't mix like part of her personality. It makes me wonder if like she's what is it? Like I don't know, maybe she might be like a foil character to herself. Like I don't know.
No, I think you're right. I mean, there's an element of trauma, and Alim is right. Because of this element of trauma, she's simply unable to. She's very different from Daniel. She's unable to cope and bring herself into right. She does that eventually, but right now there is this element of trauma I mean, imagine yourself being kidnapped at 16 years old and having, like Alim described it very well, having to, your life is in danger and you have to end up with this old man who's a jerk. Everybody knows it, right? So there's really, she's in trauma. So she's really survival mode, camouflage mode, right? And it's very understandable what she's doing. Stage, what would you like to add?
Well, she listened to Mordecai. She pretty much took everything that Mordecai was saying as serious because Mordecai raised her. He's her father. He's pretty much his brother father figure. And back in those days, that was very, very common to listen to your parents. As a matter of fact, if you go back in the Jewish traditions, in Torah, it talks about the laws and regulations of how kids should act towards their parents. Back then, if you were to curse or even touch your parent in an impure, not that sounds weird, in a what's it called, in an aggressive manner, you can be killed. Literally, you can be stoned to death. So I can see why she would act. She would listen to Mordecai in such an obedient way.
That's an element too, right? Maybe she's trusting Mordechai and she's kind of following his advice blindly as she has been raised to do, right? But again, this doesn't show. Again, this is a woman who follows, right? Everyone. So good. And so yes, just to go back now to Olivera, she's seeing this book's very patriarchal book, and she's wondering, rightly so, right? How are we in the mother's house? Like, where is the where is the mother's house, right? Very patriarchal so far, absolutely. And we'll have to wait for a few chapters before the subversion. We'll say with Esther, a gentle subversion of patriarchy, but nevertheless, subversion is going to occur. So don't give up hope, Olivera. Okay. Delmas. Delmas is pondering whether, so Delmas is worried about Esther breaking some kind of law by ending up with this guy, this pagan king, right? So you're going over the laws of divorce in your mind to see whether it's okay for her to be in this situation. Delmas, it's not okay. The whole situation is messed up, right? I mean, not only, of course, there's the element, obviously, yeah, he's divorced, and you mentioned that in the end, this is not a good situation, but at the same time, she's kidnapped. This is a kind of rape, right, situation. This is coercion. This is more than marriage. This is non-consensual sex, right? So we are in a situation of violent sexual behavior towards a woman. So even if the king was, the example of purity, the whole situation is messed up. And of course, the rabbis are like you. They're also, beating their head against the wall to try to find ways to arrange the situation. Is very difficult. Situation is messed up. And of course, the question is, right, and a lot of you are asking this. I think also Alim asked this, right? What kind of sacred marriage is this, right? In a situation where there's no consent, right? The woman is passive. So you're right. Sacred marriage is not now, right? The whole situation where she enters the king's bedroom and, is accepted, is made queen. This is not yet the sacred marriage, right? Sacred marriage comes after, when she begins to speak, right? We're going to look at that. But for now, we're definitely not in the sacred marriage because no consent. She's not yet. Remember, sacred marriage implies the woman already highly individuated. Remember Inanna. Inanna and Gilgamesh is not a sacred marriage. It's a messed up teenage right situation. Only when Inanna comes to her full womanhood, right? And she's leaning against the apple tree and showing off her feminine, assets, right? Then she's ready for the sacred marriage. So Esther here, she's Inanna before Gilgamesh, right? So in a way, she's not yet. There is no sacred marriage when she enters the king's bed, right? At that point, sacred marriage comes later, and the shift, we're going to look at it next time, is when she puts on her royal robes. There is a moment where she actually puts on her royal robes and enters into a new personality. Then you will have, after that, right, the sacred marriage. So does that help a little bit, Alim? And forgot who I'm talking to. A bunch of you who are worried about the sacred marriage. Are you seeing how there is no sacred marriage yet? Alim, we good? Okay. All right. So Going on. You guys are so good. I just love it. I love your comments. Okay, what did I write here with? There was something else with Delmas. Oh yeah, I said that already. Okay, Ahmad. So you're looking. Okay, so you're wondering how Jews had such positions of power. You're looking at Mordechai, right? So yeah, this is way. Remember, so Nebuchadnezzar is way centuries before. This is when Daniel, right? So these Jews have been there for centuries. They're assimilated. And there was, and also you have to know that within the Babylonian Empire, Persian Empire, they would intentionally put conquered nations in positions of power. In other words, what their technique was, Ahmad, they would conquer a country, take the elites, and Daniel was part of these elites, right? Take the elites and put them in positions of power in the Babylonian Empire. Why do you think this is a strategic idea? What are they doing? What do you think? Let's hear you on this.
I have no idea.
Okay, all right. So, for example, Daniel becomes one of the eunuchs closest to the king. Of course, they castrate them first, all of them, right? And then they put them in positions of power. The reason being, Osayid, you want to answer? Go ahead.
Well, I would assume that it's like weeding out the weeds. The better ones are going up top because it really is. There's no point of having the ones that are conquered to be there if all they are manual, pretty much would be taken as manual labor. But other ones like I would say bourgeoisies, you can call them, have a higher position because they can, versus the ones that are just wait. I'm going now into Descent of Man by Darwin, but that's what I'm pretty much thinking, that they're taking the ones that are good and lifting them up, and the ones that are pretty much useless just manual labor. Now I'm most likely wrong, but
No, you're on the right track, right? They take the elites and they integrate and assimilate them. Now there's no one left to lead an insurrection because they're integrated and assimilated. If you're in a position of power in the Babylonian Empire, you're not going to go and go back, right? So they have, and then they would bring Babylonians to the land and assimilate and mix them up. So that was their strategy was assimilation, right? Of Jews into Babylon and Babylonians into Israel. So they would bring actually a lot of Babylonians left and were living there mixing with the population. So once you have taken away the elites and integrated them, assimilated them, i.e. neutralized them, right? There's no one left to really rebuild the country. So that was the strategy, right? So Jews had positions of power because that was a strategy of the Babylonian Empire to weaken at least their nationalistic spirit, right? Does it make sense, Ahmad?
Yes, but isn't Ahasuerus a Persian king?
Yes. So at first, Babylon was led by the Babylonians, and then the Persians invaded, and they had Babylon as their city, and they started to rule. So yes, so he was Persian, but he was in this long line of Babylonian kings. He was seated in Babylon, but Persian. Make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
great. Okay, so now good. So we're getting a good of the historical background with your questions. Okay, now a lot of you are asking, why did Mordechai not want to bow down in front of Haman? This is not good survival technique. A lot of you are mentioning this is Granick, Kestenbaum, both of you, and also Ahmad are wondering, right, about this. This is silly, right? Why is he letting his ego, it looks like, right, an ego thing. Not letting him, and Kestenbaum makes a good point, right? At no point does Haman parade himself as God. So it's not like the case, same case, by the way, in the book of Daniel, where the king wants to be worshipped as a god and tells everyone, bow down to me or my statue, right? He's not doing that, right? This is a different situation. So you know the background, though, of if anyone is familiar with the family feud, on the family level between the family of Haman and the family of Mordechai. Anybody know where you can trace back their ancestors? There's one event when they were in their ancestry fighting. These guys know each other. Granick, go ahead.
Was Agag was he a king maybe in Samuel's time? And I think Saul had fought with him or something.
Exactly. No, I'm just wondering because I have forgotten. Agag was king of the Philistines. Which nation
I
was he?
think the Amalekim.
Amalekites. Amalekites. Thank you. Okay, so back in the day, right? This is when you have the first king of Israel, right? This is in the beginning of the monarchy, right? Remember when the Hebrews arrive in the land and they have a few judges and then they have their first king, King Saul. King Saul is the ancestor of Mordechai. Okay, so we know that's how Esther is of royal line, right? Now, at that time, King Saul was engaged in a fight against a people called the Amalekites. I'm going to write it in the chat. Right, you're getting into the intrigues of the Babylonian court. Right, so these Amalekites had a king called Agag, and there was a whole thing where God had commanded Saul to kill Agag, and he spares him, and it ends up very badly for Saul. He's abandoned by God. It's a mess, right? And so you had these two families, royal families, the royal family of Agag of the Amalekites and the royal family of Saul of the Israelites. They were fighting. And now you have the descendants, right? Haman is a descendant of Agag. So there is a history behind the behavior. So when Mordechai is saying, I'm not bowing down to you, right? He knows this is a standoff between two kings, really. This is what's happening, right? So this is the male part of the book, right? You have this whole drama going on between these two men where one wants to crush the other because of the history, because he was crushed, Agag was crushed, right? So now there's this kind of thing like, I'm gonna crush you, right? And Mordechai is like, no, you're not. I'm not gonna let you, right, bring me down. And in the end, of course, the history, at least in Jewish perspective, history is repaired because Haman is killed, right? So all is well. The death ultimately occurs, right, of that line. So that's what's going on perhaps, right, behind the whole feud between Haman and Mordechai. Okay, great. Going back to Esther. No, Goldstein has a question that I haven't figured out either. I hadn't noticed actually. Anyone can help us. This is verse 19. If you want to go briefly, where's my Bible? Here we are. So verse 19 of chapter 2. Where is it? Yeah. She talks about the virgins being assembled a second time, right? And again, Esther is hiding. This is right. So they're assembled the first time in verse 8 when they're rallied, right? And they're taken, and Esther is part of these women that are kidnapped and brought into this tower of the fortress of Shushan. And then they go through the beauty treatment, and then Esther she wins, right? She's crowned queen. And then the virgins, the young women, are assembled a second time. Anybody know why this detail in verse 19? I don't know. I have Kestenbaum, go ahead.
I was going to comment earlier about the history of Mordechai and Haman, how the the Midrash says, it goes even further and says that when the Jews were given permission from King Cyrus to rebuild the temple, the descendants of Agag, who were living in Samaria at the time, they wanted to take part in it, but because they weren't actually Jews, the Jewish people refused their requests, and eventually the Samaritans went to Persia, and Egypt or Persia, I actually don't remember, and basically said that the Jews are not just rebuilding the temple under King Cyrus, but they're actually trying to mobilize an army. And so the Samaritans sent Haman as their representative in court, and Mordechai and the Jews selected Mordechai as their representative in court. And on the way, again, this is all the Midrash, so how literally you take it. Yeah. And so this is what the rabbis say. Okay. And so on the way, Haman ate all of his food provisions, and Mordechai didn't. So Haman said to Mordechai, if you sell me your food, I will be an indentured servant to you for all the days of my life. So Haman, again, according to this midrashic interpretation of the rabbis, Haman was actually the servant of Mordechai.
Of course, the rabbis would come up with a plan.
Yeah, I don't know where they get that from, but...
Yes, interesting. Yeah, I would love to, if you could write me the reference, I would love to look into that. Yeah, it's interesting. Excellent. Any idea, Kestenbaum, for why there's a second time the virgins are assembled in verse 19? Or anybody else who wants to try? I'm curious. I mean, I really don't know. Goldstein. I have to think about it. Maybe I'll study it and figure it out by next time. Okay. Also, she's saying, yes, same issue with, she's talking also about Mordechai and Kestenbaum also. Kestenbaum is asking, yeah, Kestenbaum, where'd you get this idea that Esther refuses to be oiled? I didn't see that.
It's more, again, it's more of the Talmud. It says this explicitly.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not like a strict reading of it.
So this is the rabbis again trying to show that Esther is showing some resistance. They're so frustrated. You can sense the frustration of the rabbis in how passive Esther is. She's not resisting anything, and they're horrified at this, right? They're like, how are you not trying? Right? So yes, so yeah, you can see that. And so they're inventing scenarios where she's, resisting, and it's not in the text, right? We don't see that. Okay, great. Now, Wagler, very good. Yeah, Wagler, interesting. He's talking about the establishment. You're a little ahead of us, Wagler. We're not there yet with the establishment of the holiday of Purim, but that's fine. And you say the king establishes it, but actually when I looked at the text, Esther actually creates that holiday. Did you notice that, Wagler? Which is interesting.
I thought it said on the text that the king established a holiday for her.
So where I'm reading, I'll show you where I read my part. Maybe you have another passage I don't know about. I'm on page, I'm chapter 9, verse 29. And I see that, hold on. Then Queen Esther, blah, 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 wrote a second letter of Purim. Oh, wait, here, let's go to the first letter. Maybe you're talking about that. Where's the first letter of Purim? It doesn't say. So I'm seeing in verse 29, so chapter 9, verse 29, that she is the one here sending these days, the edict saying, these days of Purim shall be observed as Mordechai, and now Queen Esther has obligated. You see what I'm saying, Wagler?
Oh, I thought we were on Esther 2 and 3.
We are. Did you find something there?
Oh, yeah, mine says he also proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts worthy of a king.
Oh, yeah, but that's not yet Purim, right? But yeah. Oh, you're talking about that holiday. Okay. Yeah. That's not yet the actual Purim, right? Which Esther. But yes, he's creating a holiday, and again, this is showing. Yes, you're right. The kind of God-given powers that he's setting, right? The calendar, which normally only God can do. Okay, I get what you're saying. Leisman, yes.
Oh, for the second house of women, I have an old Hebrew Bible with a translation, and it says, the second house of the women, this is a commentary, where they would remain for the rest of their lives in practical widowhood. They would not be permitted to go into the world and marry after consorting with the king.
There you go, Goldstein. That's your answer. Okay, Goldstein, are you there? Where's Goldstein? You there, Goldstein?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I think this is your answer. They would be assembled and kept as widows. So once they've slept with the king, they can't sleep with anybody else, right? Of course. And so, of course, the king now found someone. So all of those virgins who slept with the king, they're doomed. They cannot go with another man because, of course, what does that mean, right? For the king, who remember is the only one who has balls, right, in the whole kingdom. So this is impossible, right, that these women would go to another man. That would be an affront to the king. So they are now going to be widows in that second. Does that make sense? That makes sense to me. Are you good, Goldstein?
I don't know if that would be the answer to why they were gathered again, because it does say that after they were taken to the king, they were then taken to a second harem where they would remain. So if they were taken to that second harem, it says that in verse 14.
Okay, let's
In the evening she would come, the next morning she would return to the second harem.
I'm trying to find verse 14. Okay, she would go in the evening with second harem in charge of blah, blah, blah. Oh, interesting. Leisman?
Yeah, it's, hold on.
So that was that second harem.
The second harem is where they stay for the rest of their lives.
Okay, so
because they've already slept with the king. Once you sleep with the king, you can't go out and marry anybody else.
so Leisman, you don't have an explanation for verse 19 when they said the virgins are assembled a second time.
No, I'm sorry. Mine was for verse 14.
Oh, and I was so happy. Okay, never mind. Okay, so Goldstein, the mystery remains. Sorry. But nice. I didn't even know about that second harem, so this is interesting. Oh my God, we have to start moving on. I'm gonna quickly, let me take one more. No, I think we did them all. Okay, let's go quickly now. Let's go into what I wanted to talk about today. All right, great. So today I want to talk about the harem. I want to focus on this delightful place. And I'm going to go a little bit on a tangent and talk and go at length about what is the meaning of the harem, or what is the meaning of this whole spa, right? Spa day or spa year, right? That the Esther goes through. And what can we learn as women from this practice, right? So I'm simply going to comment on this Babylonian practice and what wisdom can we gain from it. So I'm going really a little bit on a tangent, but it's an important tangent. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about this, the treatment, right? Just to clarify a few things. So it mentions food, right? So they're given special foods. So connection between food and beauty, right? Which we could go into, but won't. Then you have the 6 months of myrrh, and then 6 months of perfumes and cosmetics. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. What does it mean literally, right? And then we'll go into go a little more into the philosophical aspect. But okay, so myrrh is you can make an oil from it, right? And we know that myrrh has two properties, right, which are interesting for beauty treatments. They're hydrating, and they're an antiseptic, right? So you have to realize where these women came from, right? If you look at the empire where it is, it's in the desert, right? Iraq, Iran, a very hot, dry place. And they would gather women from the whole kingdom. So meaning these women could be from some remote village, right? They would be having like dry skin, cracked, and everything cracked, and sometimes some skin diseases, right? They brought them from anywhere, right? So the myrrh is there to treat and disinfect and hydrate the skin which has grown. I mean, the women were not like us with like, Lancome or Clarins, face creams, they were not living, they were living in the countryside, working in the sun, in the desert. So their skin was probably in pretty bad condition, right? Even if they're beautiful. So the myrrh is really there to disinfect, to hydrate, to cleanse. And once they've gone through that process, which really does take time, right, to renew the skin, they would go into the perfumes and cosmetics. And we know already from the culture, right, the cosmetics, we know that they would use this kind of darkening of the eyes that you see in Egypt. You would have henna for the hair, right, and a lot of perfumes, right, so all of this, right, is happening. And then, of course, you have the interesting expression, the laws of women. Where else did we see this expression? We read a text where you had the same concept of the laws of women. Anybody remember? Nobody? Do you remember when Inanna came back from her boat trip did we read that? When Inanna went to see Enki, the god of wisdom? Anybody? Did I make you read that? Put your hand in the screen if I made you read that. Yes, okay, so what did she bring back? What was one of the treasures of wisdom she brought back from Enki? Or Enlil, I forget which one. I forget the name of this god of wisdom. Anybody remember? No? Okay. Guess what? Same expression, laws of women. If you read the long list, if you go back to the text, right, she brought back the arts of carpentry, the arts of cooking, the arts, whatever. And then one of the arts that she brought back were the laws of women. So this is the technical phrase, right, the laws of women. And what we know now is that the laws of women really had to do with the way women were taught to seduce and to please, right, the men. So if you've watched, one way to learn about this in a different culture, in Indian culture, I would really suggest, once you're of age, once you're 18, you can watch the Kuma Sutra. It's an old movie, but it's very beautifully made about the preparation of the concubines of the king in India. And you have the whole shebang of the laws of women. It's a beautiful film, right? They're taught how to dance, how to sing. They're taught all the positions of love, right? They're of course made beautiful. So you had a whole panoply, right, of laws, of wisdom, right, that women would learn so that they could please, right, the men or the king, right? Usually these were concubines who were learning these arts of love, right? So that when they would enter in the king's presence, they would know what to do, right? So that's what's going on in that harem, right? So this is such an unusual text that I wanted to focus on it, because in the Hebrew Bible, you don't really have this kind of focus usually, right? There's nothing really. The Hebrew Bible we know already is mostly father's house literature, right? So the emphasis is not really on the laws of women, it's on the laws of men, right? So most of the laws in the Hebrew Bible are really usually never emphasizing, right, pleasure and pleasing, and this is not the kind of laws you have there. You have laws emphasizing responsibility, duty, action, right? And why, right? You can wonder why the most of the laws in the Hebrew Bible are about justice, doing this, doing that, doing this, which are good deeds, right? So I've thought about it, right? What is the difference between these laws of women and here the laws that we have when we read the Pentateuch, right? So I think it's a difference of of gender, right? Most of the laws in the Pentateuch have to do with doing, which is a way to teach about love, right? We know that to love in terms of a man loves by doing, right? When a man is a loving man, right, he's usually not just sitting there, right? He's doing something for you, right? So remember the difference between yang and yin, right? We have this in the Hebrew Bible too, right? Man being more yang, he is going to express or even feel love by doing things for you, right? Which is why we talked about with Ruth, right? The best way to get a man to love you is not to do things for him, is to inspire his doing for you. That's what Ruth does in a stroke of genius, right? She's not going around working for Boaz trying to please him. She's telling him, this is what I desire, this is what I need you to do, and in doing this you can sense that his love awakens for her, right? So you can jot this down, right? That in general, psychologically speaking, right, the man falls in love by doing for you, right? And by doing for you in a way, obviously, that he feels is successful, right? If you're constantly miserable with what he's doing, he's never going to love you, right? But if he's sensing that this woman is inviting him to do and enjoying this is how the man awakens, right? This is how the love awakens in a man's heart. And that's what Ruth is able to awaken, right? So that's for the man. Now, so love in the Hebrew Bible, because the Hebrew Bible is male-oriented, is going to be about doing. So a lot of the commandments are about doing, right? But here we are in a different context. This is the laws of women. And we know that woman loves differently, or her love is expressed differently than the man. And again, I'm talking in terms of a heterosexual relationship, right? This is in that context. The woman in this type of relationship expresses her love, or the man will feel loved when she is receiving him. So I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit, because I think as women we have forgotten this, right? The man feels loved by the woman, not when she's doing his dishes and cleaning his floors and washing his laundry, right? That's his mom. Man loves the woman when he feels that she receives him, right? In other words, when he feels received, when he feels accepted, when he feels welcomed, in an environment which is receptive, right? Where he feels that what he's doing is received joyfully. This is when a man actually begins to feel loved by a woman. So in other words, so that's, we have to understand this, because as women we start to think, oh, in order to please or make this man love me or please him, I'm going to do a lot for him. This is completely counterproductive, right? What really makes a man fall in love with a woman is when he senses that what he is doing is being received joyfully by the woman. Now, check with the males in the class. Men, am I on the right track? I have to check with you occasionally, because I cannot just talk about you in your presence. With Ahmed is like, okay. Stage is like, all right. Sosa is yes. Okay, thank you, Sosa, for your support. Okay, continuing. Okay, Ahmed agrees. All right, excellent. Continuing. So, now, if a woman loves by receiving, and her capacity to love, right, has to do with her capacity to receive, then we're going to see actually that pleasure, right, which is what we're going to talk about now, which is the pleasure of the harem, right? The pleasure, the ability to to undergo or to feel pleasure as a woman has everything to do with her ability to love. So we're going to talk about the connection. So make sure you jot this down. There's a connection, which I believe exists, and we'll see that in the text, between the capacity for pleasure that a woman has and her capacity for love. Okay, let me say that again. I'll put it in the chat. This is an important point. There is a connection between capacity for pleasure, this I'm talking about a woman, all right, and her capacity for love. So this sounds very strange. And as women, right, raised in the patriarchal context, this is a completely new idea. What do you mean my capacity for pleasure has to do with my capacity for love? I thought, you know, the more I sacrifice, the more I give, the more I pour myself, you know, the more I suffer, the more loving I am to my family and my husband. Here, this what we're learning here, what I'm getting from this text is that no, your ability to truly love a man as a woman is proportional to your ability to your capacity for pleasure. So let's look at that, right? I want to talk for the rest of the class about pleasure. Okay, so I know this is another bad word in the context of religious context, usually doesn't speak about pleasure. But I want to go into what is pleasure, how is pleasure connected to love, right? And why it is so important, right? That every woman learn the arts, right? The arts, the laws of the women, which have to do with pleasure, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So I've been thinking a lot about this, right? Because I think just looking at this text and thinking why the author put so much time in this description, which is all about pleasure, right? What is going on? Okay, so let's begin. What is pleasure? And then we'll see the connection with love, and then we'll understand everything. Okay, pleasure. Simply pleasure is the ability to open up and to enjoy what is outside of you, right? Anything that you're doing which is pleasurable always involves two things. Something outside of you that you are enjoying. So pleasure of food, when you're eating food, something on the outside, tastes good, right? Or you're drinking it, it feels good. Or pleasure of walking, right, in the sunlight, feels good, right? Something from the outside. Or pleasure of a conversation with another human being, feel happy, right? To be in their presence. Pleasure of receiving touch, right? Pleasure of beautiful sound, right? Or pleasure of seeing something beautiful. Are you seeing how pleasure is simply the ability to open up, right? And enjoy what is around you. And the opposite of pleasure, right, is being contracted and everything is just assaulting you, right? So are you seeing how pleasure is an opening? Anytime you experience pleasure, you are opening up in some way. Are we clear on this definition of pleasure? Because I'm going somewhere with that, but I want to make sure we're all together. Are we here? Are we good? Put your hand on the screen if you're with me on the definition, right? Pleasure is simply, anytime you feel pleasure, you're opening up. The more you experience pleasure in your life, the more you're opening up, right? The less you experience pleasure, the more contracted, the more closed off, the more tense you are as a woman. And you can check, by the way, you can check yourself right now as a woman. How tense am I? I tend to get very tense, stressed, right? And that has to do with, okay, I haven't had enough opportunities for pleasure or relaxing, right? Pleasure can be anything. Pleasure is a bath. Pleasure is reading a good book, not for school. Pleasure is taking a walk. Pleasure is swimming in the ocean. Pleasure, right? Do you see how many opportunities for pleasure we have? What I'm learning from this text is that pleasure is necessary. And we'll see why. But first of all, definition of pleasure. Pleasure is, it's a kind of relaxation, you know, where you are relaxing in the presence of something outside of you. You're opening up to it, right? Now, are you seeing the connection? So first of all, right, pleasure is really about the woman opening up, right? Now, this is why pleasure can be understood as the prelude to love. Knowing, having defined love as receptivity, right? Opening, the woman is open to the man, right? She's not closed off. She's able to welcome him. Can you see how pleasure is actually the pedagogy of love? How pleasure, in a way, is teaching the woman, to open up, teaching her to receive, creating this opening so that when the man comes along, right, she's ready. She's not contracted, tense, busy, focused on something else. She's open, available, present, right? And in that moment, because she has, through the discipline of pleasure, taught herself openness, presence, availability, enjoyment, when the man comes along, she's in the right state. Are you seeing what I'm saying? If you can put your hand if you're seeing what I'm saying. Okay, a couple of you are. Okay, good. All right. So let me make it clear, right? So we saw, right, let me just summarize everything. We saw that a woman loves primordially by receiving, right? Not by doing. A man feels loved from a woman, right? When he feels fully received by the woman. Let me give you some examples, right? So this is of course in the body, right? If the man is fully received in a woman's body, there's no contraction, there's no rejection, there's no pushback, right? Of course, he's going to feel loved, right? And we get tense there too, right? As women, sometimes hard to open up, right? So then, this is going to create a disconnect. So first of all, right, physically, the man needs to feel received by the woman, but not only physically, psychologically, spiritually, intellectually, right? So how often, right, does the man come to you with some new idea which you think is stupid, right? Or comes with a new project that you're like, oh Lord, no, please, right? And you reject and criticize and you make him feel small, right? Again, this is not opening. This is not receiving. So receiving the man, not only physically, but emotionally, when the man is sharing some thoughts or ideas or projects or dreams or aspirations, right? Not criticizing or belittling or complaining. All of these forms of criticism is rejection. It's not receptivity. So you receive the man also psychologically, intellectually, his ideas, his thoughts. Are you receptive, right? Spiritually, right? Are you able to accept the rhythm of his spiritual growth, right? Without pushing him along. Hurry up, grow up, be mature, marry me. So that's the idea, right? So receptivity on all levels is how a man will feel loved. If at any point your man turns to you, ladies, and tells you, I don't feel loved by you, and you're like, what? But I love you, right? Ask yourself, how receptive have I been to this man physically, intellectually, psychologically? Am I receiving his body? Am I receiving his thoughts, his dreams, his aspirations? Or am I constantly, postponing physical intimacy? Or am I constantly criticizing him or complaining about the last idiotic thing he did in the house, right? Are you receptive or are you rejecting, right? That's how women, so women are so surprised because they sacrifice so much for the man. I know so many stories, right? The woman did so much in the house, really cooking every day, cleaning every day, has a job, takes care of the kids, and one day the man has the nerve to tell her, you don't love me? And the woman is like, what the hell? Right? Why? Because the man feels love not by your doing, but by your receiving, right? So pleasure is developing that receptive capacity. The more you are able to fill your life with pleasure, the more receptive, welcoming, relaxed you become as a woman, and the more you are able to actually be loving in the way that the man understands as love, i.e. receiving, right? So the harem, where the woman is, right? Not to downplay the traumatic experience of being locked up in a harem, but the whole emphasis on the pleasure and the beauty treatments, right? The diet, the massages, the baths, the cosmetics, the learning about love, right? The way I'm seeing this, the arts of women or the laws of women are laws that teach a woman develop, expand your capacity for pleasure, right? Learn to feel pleasure in your body, free your body, right? Able to explore all the ways that my body can feel pleasure, because that is the best preparation, right? For love in that sense, right? And you can see right away, right? You know yourself, you can test yourself. When you don't have enough pleasure in your life, how do you become? Rigid, contracted, closed, hard, right? And so you can test yourself, right? And when you're like this, you are not, in a way, you are not loving, right? Even if you feel love and you're doing a lot, if you're rigid, contracted, tense, stressed, right? The man is not going to feel loved, right? And pleasure, in a way, can heal us, right? Especially, by the way, pleasure can heal us not only of, make us more open and so forth, but if there has been a past trauma, and I want to emphasize this a little bit because a lot of us are tense because of past trauma. We can't open up anymore, right? A lot of us used to be open when we were teenagers, first love, whatever, but something happened and now we're like this, right? Exactly, like this, right? Tense, contracted. Pleasure can actually start to heal that area of trauma. That's why I tell people when they're going through heartbreaks or some kind of, difficult time, I tell them, go outside, do things you love, immerse yourself in nature, exercise, dance, love life, find pleasurable things to do. The more you accumulate these pleasurable things, the more you are healing yourself from that trauma, and the more you're able to open up again, right? To love, right? Okay. Good. I see Stage has a question. Go ahead, Stage.
Yeah, with all truth and honesty, though, at that point in time, I don't think the king cared about any of that. I think right now, at that time, he just wanted to get rid of the queen and get another one there. So what he was looking for was a good-looking woman who um, who can satisfy his need at that particular time. What you're talking about, pleasure, kind of comes to the king later on. Right now, I think at that time, king just wants to get rid of the queen, get another one, the best looking virgin there is.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
and at that time he doesn't care about the feelings, he doesn't care about anything. Later on, I would say that pleasure, like you're talking about, develops.
Yeah,
And
so
that's what he's looking on later on, probably.
the king, to be honest, at this point of time is very primitive. Any woman, actually, he's really enjoying all of his new virgins every night, right? So he's not, when I'm talking about pleasure, I'm talking about the training that the women underwent, right? The preparation for love that they underwent in general. This is general sex education for women. I mean, imagine.
Okay, understood.
Right? It's not about the king's pleasure. It's about the woman. This is so interesting, right? Imagine sex education being a big spa, right? Where you learn about pleasure. Now that's some sex education, that I would like to have. Instead, we have this kind of, horrible thing that they teach us in school, right? So this is really the development of the woman's sensuality, the development of her, the awakening of her body. And I'm just focusing on this general training that women underwent for love, right? And this was a training based on pleasure. When you look at these 6 months of baths, right? In spices, and then and which included certainly massage and showers, right? And the special foods and the cosmetics. I mean, I'm looking at it, this big spa day, right? And my question was, why is it that the queen or people, these concubines, are preparing for love through pleasure? And that's where I went into this spiel of, well, pleasure for a woman, right, is helping her open up, which is the best preparation for love, if love is understood as receiving, right? Makes sense, Stage? I think you're clearer now, right?
No, yeah, I understood. I was just talking from the perspective of the king at that time. He doesn't, but
Yeah.
I understand right now you're just talking about the preparation. Okay, no problem.
Absolutely.
Understood.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, Pierre-Antoine, absolutely, right? Self-love. You cannot love someone if you have no self-love. And pleasure is pure self-love, right? If a woman doesn't love herself, we can say that, and she cannot love another person. And what do I mean by self-love? In this case, in this context, right? How much pleasure have you allowed in your life? How much love are you giving yourself or showering yourself with? This will determine how loving you will be as a woman. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Look, imagine you have a big family, like 3 kids or 4 kids, right? And then you're stressed and you're running around and you have no time for yourself and you start hating those kids and you want to kill them, right? Imagine if you had time to care for yourself, how much more loving you would be, right? And the main issue with a lot of women, no time for self-care. And so their relationships disintegrate as a direct result of that. If you want to mend a relationship, don't try to mend the relationship. Go find some pleasurable thing to do to restore yourself, and then it will be natural, right? So this is very powerful, right? This notion, this reminder, especially for us Western women who are more about efficiency, productivity, fixing, right? And we have lost, I think, the ancient arts of treasure, right? I would ask any of you in the class, when's the last time you went to a spa? I know none of you have gone. Well, it's COVID, so you can't really go. But I am pretty sure most of you don't have a practice of a spa day or, anything like that. And what we're learning here is the ancient arts of pleasure as the preparation for love, right? The best way to prepare for love is not to learn how to cook, not to learn how to do laundry. It's not about, being, what are some of the other things? It's sewing, learning to sew, learning to knit, right? This is not the preparation for love. Preparation for love, it's beautiful practice, is self-care. How much pleasure, how much capacity for pleasure have you developed in your life? Pierre-Antoine, go ahead.
So like as like a Western woman, right? Like how do you think like one can just unlearn all of that? Because at least all my life, like not that I've been physically like literally told this phrase, but like I've been told like self-sacrifice. It's like it's all about the cooking. Like you gotta learn how to cook, you gotta learn how to clean, because no man likes like dirty woman, like stuff like that. So it's like that stuff just always ingrained into you. So it's like that's what you think love is, but like how do you unlearn all of that and not fall into the habit, because it's literally just a habit at this point.
Yep.
So like, how do you do that?
I mean, it's first of all realizing that we've been taught fathers. How do you call it? There's the laws of the women. We've been taught the laws of the man as women, right? We've been taught do, and that's how you love, right? And here we're being taught don't do, receive, right? And that's how. So it's an upside down thing, right? But if you look, most divorces, many divorces, the house looks great. Right?
Yeah.
About, I mean, of course, obviously, it's important to have a nice house, right? A clean and whatever. But the man, ultimately, the love comes down to how are you receiving me? How present are you to me? How available are you to me? How much are you enjoying me? Not how much are you doing for me? How much are you enjoying my presence and my gifts and what I am doing for you? Right? So we have to really revolutionize, and I'm glad you're seeing, right? The flip we have to do
Yeah.
in order to really become lovers and not just mothers, right?
Yeah.
Mother the man and do all his laundry and cook and everything. But we haven't been taught to be lovers. And what I love about this text is I'm getting a glimpse into what does it mean to the laws of the women, which were there to teach them to be lovers. Remember, Inanna was never meant to be a housewife. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'll be with you, Olivera, in a second. I'm trembling. But when I just want to add this thing about Inanna. Remember when her brother says, I'm going to bring you a husband, right? Inanna's like, who's going to cook for me? Who's going to do my clothes? Who's going to? And
Yeah.
he's like, I'll do it, right? So Inanna is not a housewife. She's a lover, right? So she
Yeah.
developed the arts of the lover. In the West, we have been taught to be housewives, but not spouses or lovers. And this is why perhaps you have a lot of problems, right? In a way, we haven't learned the art of receiving. Olivera, I'm ready for you. Go ahead.
I come in peace. I am just going to say, in the West also, it's not like you on this case of Esther, she's dating this extremely rich man. I am sure Jeff Bezos' partner has the time to do all this space, but woman is not kind of choosing to work today. It's like you kind of trying to survive, and sometimes it needs the man and the woman working to like pay rent in New York. So I'm just trying to think like it's not that like a woman is just trying to like go to the workforce. You kind of have to make. So how does that apply on a capitalist society where you must like your work is necessary and all those things around you are almost demanding of you? It's not that you have a choice pretty much.
Yeah. So let's remember, right? Of course, that if we look at the book of Genesis, the woman has two roles, right? She's meant to rule alongside of the man, so enter the workforce, be part of that. But she has a very special role which has to do with the relationship, right? The ezer kenegdo. So I think it's a balance. The woman has to learn to strike, and you're right. We are in a time where there is still an imbalance. We have succeeded now in entering the workforce, right? And we are now, ruling again, right? The world alongside the man. But now we also have to have work life balance. And this is where we struggle. And this is why I said it last time, because the structure of the world is still structured for a man. It is not structured for a woman. A woman doctor, a woman professor, a woman anything who enters the workforce is going to struggle, right? So this is the time now, absolutely, to recreate the balance between me as a spouse and me as a queen, right? I rule alongside the man as a queen, but I'm also a lover, right? And it's an issue now of creating that balance, which there was not even any balance. We were outside of the picture for centuries, right? Now at least we've entered the workforce, but now we have to find the way to also be queens in our homes, not just outside. And in that is the difficulty, right? This is why I was saying feminism was great into putting us into the workforce, but it's not doing enough into helping us preserve our relationships. This is where I think the next step of feminism should go. Make sense, Olivera?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, great. Good. Pierre-Antoine, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I feel like, okay, feminists are going to have a problem with this. Like a lot, because it's really, like Olivera said, like last class, feminism, it's not, like, yeah, like we said, like it's very confrontational and it's all about like going against the man. It's very a critical thing because there's a lot wrong with a lot of patriarchies. Like I think we said this in like the very beginning of like our first class meeting. Like patriarchy has like taken all their rules and laws like out of proportion and like use it to abuse people. And like I think feminism is just about critiquing like the patriarchy. So I don't think it's ever going to go into that direction, because first and foremost, like it's also about critiquing, but it's also like, I don't know how to put it, but it's mostly like, it's like we said, it's not really about like relationships or like I could do this by myself because that's just how it is. Like, I don't know. To me, I also have this issue of like, I don't like the whole idea of like men doing things for me. It makes me feel weird and uncomfortable. I don't like the idea. I'm not weak. I could do the same thing you can. But I don't know. I just think it's not a realistic thing that's going to happen anytime soon. I don't know if things can change, but I'm just saying.
No, I agree, right? Feminism has really developed the neged, right? They are good at speaking truth to power, right? What we need to develop, however, I really sense the urgency, is the ke, right? How can we now be it's good to be against the man, right? This is an important step, especially when we've been oppressed. But now how can we be with? We need to begin formulating some kind of path, right, to heal the relationship with the man. So people are doing that already. People like Bell Hooks, right? People like Alice Walker. These are all, by the way, African Americans. It's interesting. A lot. This is the womanists, right, which I mentioned in the beginning. The African American feminism is much more relational. And so I'm seeing a path paved by these thinkers. Alice Walker, Bell Hooks are two of the main ones that come to mind. There's also Hudson Weems, who's very good. So these are a few of the womanists that are paving the path towards a feminism which is relational now. Not just about equality, but about relationality. So it's happening, right? But in the African American feminism, which needs to become more mainstream as far as I'm concerned, right? So yeah, very good. So yeah, this is not easy. So that's the idea, is now to really flip, right? The whole what it means to love, which we've been taught the opposite, because we've been taught father's house laws, right, instead of mother's house laws. And then to really begin to cultivate this capacity for pleasure. The more capacity for pleasure you have, the more capacity for love, right? For receptivity in that sense, right? Excellent. Anybody else before we conclude? I see half the class is left. It's normal. We're through almost. But anybody else has anything to add?
I just want to ask, how one develop this capacity for pleasure?
How? You're asking how to develop it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, I mean, it's very simple. You just start, you can make a list. What are the things I would love to do and I never have time to, right? I mean, at first, to be honest, it's hard for some of us who are so busy, right? But you can start creating a space for pleasure because you know, see, this is the thing. We tend to ignore pleasure because we think it's not important. Oh, I got to be productive. I got to put food on the table. I got this and this to do. But when we realize that self-care or pleasure is the basis for being a loving spouse, right? Now it becomes important. I have to take time for this manicure now, right? Because this can help me love you, right? So if you see the purpose, I mean the how pleasure, right, taking time for self-care and pleasure really is a very noble task in because it teaches you to be more loving, right? Or because it enlarges your capacity to receive and to love, then you will take time. And so I would suggest start making a list of things you've always wanted to do. And in a way, this in the beginning, it's hard. You don't want to do it. I'm like, I don't have time. This is stressful. I don't want to, right? But as you do it, you will see how your relationships will change. You're just more patient. I mean, listen, before I teach you guys, you know what I do? Because some of you, yeah. So anyway, before I teach you guys, I actually take a whole hour where I'm reading a nice book, drinking chai tea, and I'm relaxing. And this is how I can be super patient with y'all when I get into the classroom, right? So pleasure actually makes you a better person. And when you realize that, you will want to prioritize it. Makes sense, Olivera?
It does. Thank you.
Good. Stage.
Yeah, I wanted to mention something about that. You keep talking about men receiving a woman. Today's society has forgotten that men have feelings and emotions, and
That's true.
yeah, I already put a comment in there, but I want to expand on that. Men have emotions just as much as women. Humans in general, men are human as well. So if a woman has needs for something uh, emotional, it's the same with men. Today, men are taught to be men. You know, you can't cry on the street. You cannot do this. You cannot do that. You have to do. You have to be. You have to be a robot, basically.
Yeah.
That's not what a man is. A man is a human, just like a woman, and I feel like an idiot thinking about this, but sorry, but
Absolutely.
yeah, that's true. Men, just like women, have feelings, emotions, certain needs, like you said, spiritual needs and all that stuff from a woman.
Yeah.
Just wanted to say that.
And we're going to talk about this male emotion or male vulnerability when we talk about how she talks to him, right? Because I mean, we make fun of, women who talk soft by saying, oh, she's stroking his ego. This is not what is going on, right? We're going to talk about the concept of emotional foreplay for the man. And we're going to talk about how the man, in a way, is very vulnerable emotionally and does need a certain type of approach, right? To be open, to be able to open up emotionally. So we'll talk about that, of course. So yes, thank you, Stage, for bringing us already into the next part. So good. So for next time, we are going to read, let me see, this is when she finally, I think a lot of you have been waiting for this moment. This is when she finally individuates as a woman. This is when she puts on the royal robe. So I'm going to have you focus on chapters. So we read 3, so you're going to read 4, 5. You're going to read 5, so 4 and 5. I guess you can read 6. Yeah. 4, 5, 6. Let me make sure. I'm gonna talk. Oh, I don't have my notes. Okay, yeah, just read till 4, 5, and 6 will be good enough. 4, 5, and 6 for next time, which will be Thursday, and then we'll talk about next week when we're gonna meet. It's still unclear, so we'll figure it out. Good. I remind you that I don't know yet, I haven't looked at your tests yet, but so if you have forgotten that there was a test on John in the weekend, that was the case, please hand in your test. And that's it. All right, guys. Nice discussion. I enjoyed it. Thank you. So you guys can go. Whoever needs to stay with a question can stay. I will see you in a couple days. Bye, everybody. Rubinov, Norina, stage.
Yeah, I guess I guess I don't have much to say. Have a nice day, Professor.
All right, thank you, stage. See you later.
You too.
Norina, you there?